When I see I love photography, I love being in my darkroom, but even my darkroom is a haunted place.
I've got to make sure that when they look at my pictures, if it's on a Sunday morning after breakfast, that it's going to hit them hard.
Tremendous heavy AK-47 fire.
I am so intensely honoured to be sitting here with Sir Don. He's often called the Dean of War Photography, but that's a sobriquet he vehemently dislikes because he considers every image that he took in conflict zones as anti-war images. So Don, you've said that photography is not about seeing, it's about feeling. Mm-hmm. And Harry once said that amid a fusillade of bullets, you would stop and take a light reading. So how did a man as compassionate as you keep the stone-cold composure amidst scenes of such unimaginable horror? How did you keep your composure, taking pictures when you felt so keenly?
Well, I had an obligation. I worked for a very wonderful newspaper under a great editor who allowed you to do what you wanted to do. And but I was two people. I was always young, and I seemed to be young years ago. I was very ambitious. I loved the idea of seeing my name under my pictures. And so when I went to these places, I was a Sunday Times man. But when I got there, I was another man. I was my own man. And when I saw the suffering, I mean, I grew up in it was quite a convenient for me to grow up where I did in North London. It was very poor and there was lots of violence, and I knew violence, I knew poverty, but I didn't know about education, culture, anything like that. So in a way, war for me was, I was introduced to war by Hollywood films, but no one in the films ever seemed to bleed. And I started making up my own moral kind of journey. I thought, I'm going to show what it's like to suffer. I'm going to show what it's like to have, loss. I saw families destroyed. I saw starving children. And I had children of my own that I went home to. So my commitment to... I didn't understand photojournalism, by the way. It wasn't a word we understood in England in the early 60s. And I was in the beginning of a learning process. I had to know what the hell I was supposed to be responsible for. But I made up my mind what it was, and it was about telling the truth. You know, photographers in the old days when I grew up had quite a tradition of staging things. And even the most famous war photograph, the Spanish Civil War, has been under question to this day, whether it's staged or not, by Robert Capa.
Right. And that never was true of you. I want to share a photo that launched your career, actually, in 1958, which was a shot of a local gang that you used to hang out with. So let's just see that for a minute. Tell us about that picture and how you picked up a camera in the first place, really.
Well, this photograph was taken at the end of the street where I lived in North London. And these boys were involved in a gang war with another part of North London, and a policeman came that night to stop it and was killed by one of the other gang. And I just came out of the Air Force with this camera, which, by the way, I'd already pawned because I thought I've got no use for this camera. I didn't actually choose photography. I felt as if it chose me, thankfully for me. But anyway, I did this one frame, this one negative, and I took it to the Observer newspaper. And they said, "Did you take it?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Would you do more?" And I said, "Yes." And they gave me £50. And for a boy of my background, £50 was like a year's life savings. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't the money. When I saw my name under that picture, I thought, I'm going to become somebody else. I'm going to get out of this dump where I live, and I'm going to be. And I knew nothing about photography, to this day I've taught myself everything I know about photography, but I still consider I'm a student of photography. Mm-hmm. I learn something every day. Mm-hmm.
Well, then the Observer, who really, this was imaginative of them, they sent you to cover the civil war in Cyprus, and you were 29 when you saw your first dead body, and you captured some unforgettable moments of grief. Tell me about this iconic picture, which of course won you your first World Press Award, this one.
Yes, because I went into the Observer one day, and the editor, Brent Campbell, said, "Would you consider going to Cyprus?" Well, I was actually stationed in the Air Force, almost right near where this photo was taken in a town called Limassol. And I knew Limassol, and I went straight to the town, and I could hear gunfire, and I was just running around like a mad dog. I thought, I'm here, I'm in the right place. And I was with a correspondent from the Observer. He was the ecclesiastical correspondent. And he said, "I've got to get out of here. I've got a dinner appointment in Nicosia." And I said, "I'll get you out." And I drove him out and came back, and the Battle of Limassol began. And I thought, this is my first war, and I felt a huge obligation to get it right and stay alive.
Yeah.
But I wasn't worried about staying alive. I was so excited, I was slightly out of control, really.
Right.
I thought this is a gift. And it was so selfish of me to think of a gift in a war.
Well, it was heady for you, really, to be in the middle of this conflict and have your camera and have this assignment. Some of the pictures that I think I love most of yours sort of capture character in motion. I mean, there's always so much going on in your pictures. You can go deep into them, and they're like, movies, each one. These men in a Cypriot village are poised for battle, yet there's something, almost elegant about that natty old man sort of crouched in the corner. How did you get that picture?
Well, when I arrived, I was locked up in the jail for the night because the police said, "Look, this is the only safe place for you to stay. We're not going to lock you in." And I woke up in the early morning, and I couldn't hear gunfire, but I could hear birds singing. And I thought, how strange. I felt for the first time in my life, for a slightly ignorant North London boy, I'm always thinking poetry. And I thought, I'm in a war. Why is this bird singing? But the thing is that if you're not aware of your own self-sensitivity, you might as well pack it in and go somewhere else and become a waiter. Mm-hmm. So I knew there was something in me that was going to make me be something special. Mm-hmm. It's very conceited for me to sit here and say this, but I made up my mind I wasn't going to be the ordinary man traveling, on the underground and being like all the other people. I wanted to break out and have a life. I didn't want to throw my life away, and photography gave me a life.
Well, you've always been this sort of staunch black and white photography man, and you took this incredible image of a homeless Irishman. It's just an extraordinary picture. Talk to me about creating this incredible picture. Who was this, and how did this happen?
Well, I was coming into Liverpool Street one day over the viaduct, and I looked down, I saw these people hanging around. I went straight into the Sunday Times where I was heading anyway, and I said to the art director, Michael Rand, I would like to do something about the homeless people. And he said, well, clear off and do it. And they never questioned my desires to do things. So I spent a few weeks without my camera with these people, and a man said to me, you've got to be careful, they're very dangerous. And I said, I'm okay, I can look after myself. I came from North London. So I called this man Neptune because he looks like the Roman god. He was an Irishman cast out of an institution without medication.
Wow.
And they threatened me. They kept, every time I did bring my camera out, they started jerking and feeling uncomfortable. But one day I saw 3 men standing asleep like horses. And they would jerk because they went off into a semi-dream and thought they were falling. Mm-hmm. In a way, my photographic life became more of a psychological journey. It wasn't just photography. I knew photography was only a word. I was journeying through another depth of humanity. And I had no education. How dare I think I have this ability to go beyond, which one photographer told me one day, at a Commonwealth Prime Minister's conference in Whitehall, he said, know your place. And I said, what place are you talking about? Mm. We were always trying to restrict ourselves, slightly uneducated people. We always thought we should stand in line. And I decided at that moment in Whitehall I was going to break that line. And I went forward.
You did. You've said, and it really sort of resonated with me, I print dark because there is darkness in me. Explain that feeling. You said, I print dark because there's darkness in me.
Yeah, well, when you go into the darkroom, because I print all my own work, when you go into the darkroom, you're alone. And all these experiences come back to you. They haunt you. They torment you. And why should I have a free life away from their suffering? I'd really bully myself, and I stay in that darkroom for 7 hours. I used to. I can't do it anymore. But in a way, the story comes back to you. And let's not forget that I was sent by a newspaper thousands of miles away, and I was expected to do something and come back within a couple of weeks or something like that. But I enjoyed the challenge. But I never let other people print my pictures. I didn't want them to destroy the negatives. And I've seen bad darkroom work in the old days. The English never knew anything about professional darkroom. So in my darkroom, I bully myself. And I used to listen to music, but I realized I was just depressing myself even more.
Oh, God. So, I mean, it must have been extremely difficult, in a sense, to sustain any kind of personal life in all of this foreign assignments, Don. I mean, you went to so many dangerous places. To have a personal life must have been really difficult. I mean, 4 marriages. There's been a lot of turbulence, right, in the Don McCullin personal life, which I would imagine is somewhat the toll of this work.
I don't want to be cozy today talking to you. I want to tell you that when you're young and ambitious, you would do anything. If someone said to me, jump into that furnace, I would have done it, particularly for Harold Evans. He was the most persuasive man, but he respected what you did. And, we'd go that last kind of mile for him. But yes, I did a lot of stupid things in my life, and I suffered a bit, which I think was okay, because, I lie in hospital bed singing, why am I in this bed? I remember lying in the hospital in Phnom Penh, and a man brought my breakfast every morning because I'd been hit by the shell the night before. And he was trying to teach me French, and he kept saying, oh, comforteur de beurre. And I thought, what the hell is he talking about? I've always tried to be jolly, but there's one side of me that's really, really very deep. And,
clearly from the work. I think your most iconic war image may have been the 1968 photo of the Marine in Vietnam, not in motion, but frozen with shell shock. I mean, he's a human sort of monument. He's a monument. He hardly looks like a human being. Tell us about that picture, Don, because how did you see it, know it was there, and take this image?
I actually hate this picture because it gets talked about too much.
Right.
And
Sorry, but
this particular man's still alive, and a friend of mine who works, Anthony Lloyd, who works with the Sunday Times, who works with the Times, tracked his family down, and they said to him, he doesn't want nothing to do with you. But, I mean, he was suffering from shell shock. He'd been through all that battle. By the way, that battle, I arrived a week late, and it was tailor-made for me, this battle. Every time I pointed my camera, I saw another amazing image. I saw men dying in front of me, and I came away from that battle emotionally drained, and I remember getting in the shower at Da Nang, the press center, and having a shower and taking all my clothes off, which I hadn't taken off for 2 weeks, and threw them straight into the bin. And I was never more alone, never more in pain, and yet there was no blood coming from me. But it taught me a lesson, the battle. And then I started thinking, why am I concentrating on soldiers and military? This is kind of almost like a propaganda exercise for the military. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I got my head firmly fixed in the Biafran War and other wars, I realized it was women and children that were picking up the bill.
Well, let's look at this extraordinary picture of the Biafran child trying to nurse at the breast of the starving mother, which is a harrowing picture to look at. Tell me about this scene. Do we have that picture of the Biafran child? There, yes.
It's a terrible, indulgent thing to say, but I think this is more like a picture of the Madonna and child. It's almost too close to kind of iconic. And there was some writing on the back of that wall. And when I had wonderful eyes when I was young, I took this picture, 1968. And by the way, this woman isn't 60 years old, she's 24 years old. And that woman would never have survived. There were 800 dying people in this camp, this old school building. But in the background, where the other person's sitting, there was some scribbling on the wall. And I thought, after I take this picture, I'm going to go down and I read the thing on the wall, and it said, "Today I am reborn," because the Igbos were Christians. Mm-hmm. And I thought, why am I here? You know, it was insane, really. All wars are insane. Mm-hmm. But we have. By the way, when I'm in these places, I would forget about my Sunday Times commitment, my contract, my agreement to bring back these pictures. I was lost. I was adrift. I was out of control, you know. And it's not until you come home and you came back to your own society that you think about that. And you were sitting in someone's house having supper and talking, and you felt, I don't belong at this table. I don't belong in this social. And I was in a bad state, really.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that the trying to adjust after seeing these images. You know, Harry once wrote that Israeli soldiers were seen to touch your jacket for good luck because you got through all these situations and actually, you know, you survived. So which of those situations that you were in made you feel that you might not make it out?
Say that.
Which of the situations that you were in these danger zones, made you feel you might not get out, the most dangerous to you personally?
Okay, that's very easy to answer that question. It wasn't to do with the wars as much as I was in Uganda during Idi Amin's reign, and there was a man called David Holden who left, and he was more of somebody else than a Sunday Times reporter. It's another story. Anyway, and he was later murdered outside of Cairo. Our profession is very strange because a lot of people infiltrate our lives, our media lives, and they're not always genuine people. Mm. So he fled, and a couple of days later, I realized why he fled, because he knew there was a coup coming across the Tanzania border. And that night, Idi went mad, and I was grabbed with 4 other journalists and taken to the military prison. And the first thing we got was a good evening indoctrination by a good hiding and whipping and kicking, and put into what they called the VIP cells. And a man came in and kicked another man to death in front of us. Not one man, a group, by the way. And each morning we'd see this bloodied truck leaving for the Nile. And they were killing people each night. And I thought, if I'm in this prison and I was sleeping in a blood-stained mattress, and I never slept, by the way. And I thought, I'm never going to get out of here. But 4 days later, I was with a man called Sandy Gore from ITV and another Reuters man, and we were released. And I thought, how did I get away with that? And by the way,
just a capricious sort of release?
Yes. What I'm really getting at here is I'm talking about myself as if it's all about me. It wasn't about me, it was about circumstances, and I don't want to come across as whinging about, the good days and the bad days. There were lots of bad days. Life hasn't been totally unkind to me. Mm-hmm. So, being a newspaper man, because I was never a journalist, photographers are always considered slightly second-rate people on the newspaper world. Once I was with a journalist, and he introduced me to somebody else. Have you met my photographer? And afterwards, when we were alone, I said, by the way, I'm not your photographer. I belong to it. So,
no, my photographer. So condescending. Well, and of course, Harry was a passionate supporter of photojournalism. And I mean, when I look back at the way your pictures were used in the Sunday Times, I mean, they were glorious. Frankly, the spreads, the layouts, the covers, the spread after spread of these incredible imageries. I mean, people just don't sort of see pictures laid out like that, really, then. I mean, is it possible now, do you think, for a photojournalist to sort of have the kind of impact that you did without this kind of, outlet which is powerful and understands presentation?
It's the best question you've asked me today, because I think I think photojournalism is dead, actually, because I'm so sick and tired. And I think the editors of our newspapers today have an obligation to give us real news. They give us fantasy. We see film stars, we see fashion, we see food all the time. There are some people in the world who can't get a meal. So I can predict every weekend the magazines will show me, Mick Jagger or some of Beckhams and people and Olivers who cook food. I'm tired of that. I want news. I want truth.
Yes.
And what we did at the Sunday Times was quite incredible. There was always a tradition in England never to show dead bodies, and why should we anyway, I have to say? Or we wouldn't show that kind of suffering, And what we've seen in Gaza lately, I could go to Gaza with my eyes blindfolded and come away with extraordinary images. The man we saw today here, I was looking at his body language, and
Motaz.
He's been injured, this man. I admire. It was the same in the Aleppo war. We were relying upon people with mobile phones. They're risking their lives, these people, to bring. And we don't want to see our newspapers covered in blood and guts every day of the week, but I would like to see a lot more information coming out of it, and I think the editors are kind of slightly shying away from offending the public, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was always the great question, really, was, were there ever pictures that collectively, or you yourself felt at the Sunday Times, we can't show that image, it's too graphic?
Well, you can. I get on a train sometimes to come to London, which I really hate, and I'm the only person on that train reading a newspaper. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I don't have a mobile phone, and I don't do computers. I don't know how to do computers. I've kept my own world. But the thing about me at the Sunday Times, I think I was overindulged with the layer. One day I went to Cuba, and I came back, and they laid out 18 pages of my pictures, and I thought it was totally over the top. But, the one thing about the Sunday Times is it gave me a life, it gave me a reputation, which I'm slightly uncomfortable about, really. I mean, I don't really want to be known for taking pictures of other people's deaths and suffering. I've done it, but I don't feel morally happy about it. I went too far, I think, really.
Well, I think that we all feel that you bore witness, you brought it home, and you made us care, and you made us
It was a waste of time. Every time there is a war, there is another war waiting in the wings. Believe me, I'll be dead in a couple of years' time, but I know that as one war is finished, another is following. And so did I do any good, or did we do any good in, I'm talking in a totally defeatist way now, but I've overindulged my kind of life, and has it been worth it?
Well, you know, we heard today from Motaz, who actually had sentiments very much like what you're expressing. He was asked, you know...
It was his war, though. It was his...
Yeah, but he also said, I feel it's been a way, you know, why? It's like I took all these pictures, I thought they might make a difference, but actually, of course, all you can do is bear the witness, and you may not see that outcome instantly, but you are making us care and feel, and it does influence, I think, how people see it.
Best thing I ever did in my photographic life, I think, was the journeys I made independently without Sunday Times commissions. At weekends, I'd go off to Bradford and the northern part of England have always been underspoken for. The people who live in the north of England, they've almost racially been treated very badly, and definitely unjustly. I would go to Bradford and walk the streets and see the poverty there in Liverpool and countries. And as a young man, I worked on a train when I was 15 years of age, washing up dishes in the dining car, and I would see those satanic cities at the age of 15. So I was very sensitive about the injustices that went on in England. The people in the north of England, without ranting, they were the backbone of this country. They've never been rewarded, and to this day they've been ignored. But photographically, I mean, what is photography? It's a bit of an excuse in a way for me to have a great life at other people's expenses. And if they don't get published, these pictures, as we see today, you know, are we doing justice to the public?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, you know, 40 years ago now, you've really transitioned to photographing landscapes and ruins, and, you know, to make that transition from the crazy violence that you saw and the pain and suffering, you've now, you know, these new images are so incredibly serene. Talk about that internal journey. I mean, was this your way of putting that period of your life that was so turbulent behind you and consciously saying, I'm going to photograph?
Can I say something really shocking about this picture?
Yeah.
When you photograph a marble statue which is white, you can't focus. So when the attendant in that museum wasn't looking, I put my credit card on her thigh. So I could focus my own credit card to get the picture shot. There is joy in me, but you know, this is where I live in Somerset, the village. It's what they call a dew pond. And these landscapes, they've helped to kind of cure I've never been a depressive person, but I do have lingering darkness, and these, just standing in the English countryside on a great day, it gives you back something, and it doesn't cost anything, and you're not stealing anything, as I've done all my life. I've been stealing other people's suffering with my camera, and it's brought me a certain amount of recognition, which I feel deeply uncomfortable about. And I've made mistakes, and you know, we have to make mistakes, but this is a way of correcting my mistakes. I'm trying to give back something that you can actually look at without feeling uncomfortable.
And is it a kind of therapy, really, for you to do this?
Sorry?
Is it a kind of therapy for you personally as well?
It's a funny old word, therapy, but I suppose it's acceptable, really. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I love photographing. Strange enough, I love photographing. I'm doing, my last book is on the Roman figures of the Roman Empire. But the Romans are the cruelest people in the world. So once again, I've put my foot straight back.
It's true.
I've trod on the punch stick. Yeah.
So you've said, which I loved what you said when you said, I have sentenced myself to peace. Have you found a measure of peace, Don?
I'm tortured by the political world we live in. There's no way of me not... There's nothing, I don't know what's going on in Ukraine and Gaza and Bangladesh and all those other countries. I'm never going to be free of conscience. And I'm never going to be free of thinking, you know, why is it them and not me? Mm-hmm. So I live a nice life in the country. I hate coming to London.
Thank you.
I'm going to give up my photography this year because I've been inhaling the chemistry of the darkroom for the last 60 years. And I want to tell you something. Just before I left the Air Force, the Royal Air Force, I did 2 years. I failed my trade test to become a photographer. I think that's enough said today, don't you?
I think so too. Well, Don, we thank you so much for your humanity, your sacrifices, the searing talent of your art. No one deserves more than you the title of truth teller. And we really honour you here today because you are really our greatest living, certainly of conflict photography, and perhaps the greatest living photographer in
Well, I'm a
England.
step away from the old people's home.
I think not. Thank you so much, Don.